Ethan's heart raced as James's hand brushed his, their eyes locking over a forgotten painting in a crowded Chicago gallery. For a moment, the world faded. Years of hiding who he was vanished in James's quiet smile. But when James whispered, "We keep this between us," Ethan's spark of hope flickered. Could he trust a man who demanded secrecy? Or was this fleeting connection the start of a truth he'd never dared to face? At 28, Ethan Harper had carved out a life of quiet control. A graphic designer by trade, he spent his days turning clients' vague ideas into sharp visuals, his evenings sketching alone in his apartment. Chicago's hum was a constant backdrop, but Ethan kept his world small, co-workers at arm's length, family at a distance. His brother Ryan's calls were rare, often laced with judgment about Ethan's weird lifestyle. Ethan shrugged it off, burying his unease. He'd learned early to hide parts of himself, especially the ones that didn't fit the mold. The gallery opening was a rare break from routine. A co-worker had dragged him along, promising free drinks and a chance to network. Ethan went, expecting nothing more than a quick appearance. Then he saw James Carter. The lawyer stood out, not for flash, but for presence, his voice steady as he debated the meaning of a bold, abstract piece. Ethan, usually silent in crowds, found himself joining in, his words tumbling out before he could stop them. James turned, his gaze sharp but warm, and asked, "What do you see in it?" They talked for hours, the crowd fading as they moved from painting to painting. James's questions pulled Ethan in, about art, life, the city. When James's hand grazed Ethan's arm, a jolt ran through him, unfamiliar, but undeniable. By the end of the night, James slipped his number into Ethan's hand. "Call me," he said, his tone low, deliberate. Ethan nodded, his pulse hammering. Their first date was a week later, in a dimly lit diner, far from James's polished law firm. James leaned forward, his voice a mix of confidence and caution. "I like you, Ethan, but my life's complicated. Family, work. We'd need to keep this quiet." Ethan hesitated, the weight of secrecy pressing against his chest. He'd spent years hiding his attraction to men, dodging questions, lying to himself. But James's touch, light on his wrist, drowned out the doubt. "Okay," Ethan said, the word a leap into the unknown. Their romance unfolded in stolen moments, late-night drives along Lake Michigan, James's hand resting on Ethan's knee. Quiet walks through empty parks, their laughter cutting through the night. Each meeting felt like a rebellion, a crack in the walls Ethan had built. James was magnetic. His stories of courtroom battles, his quick wit, the way he made Ethan feel seen. But the secrecy gnawed at him. James never invited him to his firm's events, never posted about their time together. "It's just easier this way," James would say, his tone firm. Ethan swallowed his questions, afraid to break what they had. Tension crept in slowly. James canceled plans, citing last-minute meetings or family dinners. Ethan spent nights alone, scrolling through James's social media, photos of charity galas, smiles with colleagues, no trace of him. At work, Ethan dodged co-workers' questions about his weekends, his silence a shield. Ryan's calls grew sharper. "You're acting off, man. What's going on?" Ethan deflected, but the weight of hiding grew heavier. He wanted to tell someone, anyone, about James, about the way his heart raced when they were together. But fear kept him quiet. The fear of judgment, of losing the fragile connection he'd found. One night, after James bailed on dinner, Ethan sat in his car, staring at the city lights. Doubt crept in. Was he enough for James? Was this love worth hiding? The question lingered, unanswered, as his phone buzzed with a text from James. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. My place? Ethan's heart lifted, but the unease remained, a quiet warning of the storm to come. Ethan's phone sat silent on the dashboard, the Chicago skyline glinting in the distance. James's last text, tomorrow 8 p.m. My place, had sparked hope, but the sting of another canceled plan lingered. 3 months into their hidden romance, Ethan felt the cracks widening. James's excuses piled up, each one a reminder of the rules: no public outings, no shared photos, no trace of them together. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, torn between longing and the growing ache of being someone's secret. Their meetings were confined to shadows, late-night drives, quick coffees in out-of-the-way spots. When they were together, James's touch erased Ethan's doubts. A brush of fingers during a walk by the river, a stolen kiss in an empty parking lot. Each moment felt like a lifeline. But the gaps between grew longer. James's texts came slower, his calls shorter. Work's insane, he'd say, or family stuff. Ethan nodded, swallowing the questions burning in his throat. He wanted to believe James, to hold on to the warmth of their early days. But the silence was deafening. At work, Ethan's guard was up. Co-workers asked about his weekends, their casual curiosity a minefield. Just chilling, he'd mutter, changing the subject. The lies weighed on him, each one a brick in the wall he'd built to protect himself. He'd never told anyone he was gay, not his friends, not his family. The thought of it tightened his chest. Chicago was progressive, but his brother Ryan's sharp comments, "Don't be weird, Ethan," echoed old fears. What would Ryan say if he knew? What would their parents think? One evening, James invited Ethan to his apartment, a rare chance to be close. They sat on the couch, a movie playing unnoticed as James talked about a big case at his firm. Ethan listened, drawn to James's passion. But the conversation shifted. "My parents keep pushing me to settle down," James said, his tone clipped. "They've got expectations." Ethan's stomach twisted. "What does that mean for us?" he asked, his voice barely steady. James hesitated, then squeezed Ethan's hand. "It doesn't change anything, just we keep this quiet, okay?" Ethan nodded, but the reassurance felt hollow. The tension spilled over at a team happy hour. A co-worker, tipsy, pressed Ethan about his dating life. "You're always so mysterious, Harper. Got a girlfriend?" The table laughed, waiting. Ethan froze, his pulse racing. "Nah, just busy," he said, forcing a smile. But the question lingered, exposing the truth he wasn't ready to face. That night, he texted James, needing reassurance. The reply came hours later. "Can't talk now. Tomorrow?" Ethan stared at the screen, the distance between them growing. Ryan's call the next day was worse. "You're dodging me," he said, his voice edged with suspicion. "What's up with you? You're not into something you shouldn't be, right?" Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "I'm fine," he snapped, hanging up. The accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it wasn't far off. He was falling for James, but the secrecy was suffocating him. Each canceled plan, each vague excuse, chipped away at his hope. Was James pulling away, or was Ethan just imagining it? The uncertainty was a knot in his chest, tightening with every unanswered text. Ethan's phone buzzed as he scrolled through social media, the screen lighting up with a photo that stopped his heart. James, smiling wide, an engagement ring sparkling on a woman's hand. The caption read, "She said yes." Rain streaked down his windshield, the Chicago night blurring outside his parked car. 6 months of stolen moments, whispered promises, quiet nights, James's hand in his, crumbled in an instant. Ethan's chest tightened, his breath shallow. This wasn't just a secret. It was a lie. He drove to James's office, the rain soaking his jacket as he waited in the empty parking garage. His hands shook, not from the cold, but from the betrayal burning through him. When James appeared, his confident stride faltered at the sight of Ethan. "What are you doing here?" James asked, his voice sharp. Ethan held up his phone, the engagement photo glaring. "What is this?" His voice cracked, raw with hurt. James's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking away. "It's what I have to do, Ethan. My family, my career, they expect this." "Expect what?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice rising. "You told me we were real. You said you cared." James sighed, his tone cold. It was real for what it was. But this, he gestured vaguely between them. "It's not sustainable, you knew that." Ethan's world tilted. "Not sustainable? I hid everything for you. I lied to everyone." His voice broke, but James didn't flinch. "You wanted this too," James said, stepping back. "Don't make it more than it was." The words hit like a punch. Ethan stood frozen as James walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the garage. The rain kept falling, but Ethan barely felt it. He drove home, the city lights a blur through his tears. James hadn't just broken his heart, he'd erased it, calling their love a fleeting mistake. At home, Ethan's phone rang. Ryan's name flashed on the screen, and he answered, too raw to dodge. "You sound like hell," Ryan said, his tone sharp. "What's going on? People are starting to talk, Ethan. You're not one of those guys, are you?" The disgust in Ryan's voice was a blade, cutting deeper than James's betrayal. Ethan's grip tightened, his voice trembling. "What if I am? What then?" Ryan paused, then scoffed. "This isn't you? You're not gay? Don't throw your life away over some phase." "It's not a phase," Ethan shouted, his voice echoing in the empty apartment. "It's who I am." He hung up, his hands shaking. Ryan's words, James's dismissal, they were a chorus of rejection, telling him his truth was wrong, unworthy. He sank to the floor, the weight of it all crushing him. He'd given James everything, his trust, his heart, his silence, and it wasn't enough. Now his brother's judgment threatened to bury him. Ethan stared at his phone, James's number still in his contacts. He wanted to call, to demand answers. But what was the point? James had chosen a life that didn't include him. And Ryan. Ryan's words confirmed what Ethan had always feared. His family might never accept him. The walls he'd built to protect himself were collapsing, leaving him exposed, alone, and unsure if he could keep hiding. The city outside hummed, indifferent, as Ethan faced a truth he couldn't outrun. To be himself, he'd have to fight a world that wasn't ready for him. Ethan sat in his car, the Chicago skyline a distant blur, his phone dark after blocking Ryan's number. James's betrayal and Ryan's venomous words, "This isn't you," had left him hollow, but the silence was worse. He'd spent months hiding his truth, shrinking himself for James, dodging Ryan's judgment. Now, with nowhere left to run, Ethan felt the weight of his own fear. He couldn't keep living half a life, but where did he start? A co-worker's flyer led him to a local LGBTQ+ support group, tucked away in a community center. Ethan hesitated at the door, his heart pounding. He'd never said the word gay out loud, not even to himself. But the ache of isolation pushed him inside. The group was small, a dozen people sharing stories over coffee. Ethan sat quietly, listening as others spoke of rejection, love, and finding their place. Their openness stirred something in him, a flicker of possibility. Then he met Alex, a painter with a warm laugh and a knack for cutting through Ethan's walls. "First time?" Alex asked, handing Ethan a coffee. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "It gets easier," Alex said, his voice steady. "You're not alone." They talked after the meeting, Alex sharing how he'd faced his own family's disapproval. "You don't have to hide who you are," he said, his hand brushing Ethan's arm. The touch was brief but grounding, a reminder of connection without shame. The group became Ethan's lifeline. Each week he shared a little more, his voice growing steadier. He spoke of James's betrayal, the engagement photo that shattered him, and Ryan's cruel words. The group listened, their nods and quiet encouragement chipping away at his fear. Alex was always there, his presence calm but unwavering, urging Ethan to see his own strength. "You're enough," Alex said one night as they walked to the L train. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Ethan's chest tightened, not with pain, but with a warmth he hadn't felt in months. But Ryan wasn't done. A week later, he showed up at Ethan's apartment unannounced, his voice sharp. "You're throwing your life away," he said, pacing. "Mom and Dad will lose it if they find out. I could tell them, you know." Ethan's pulse spiked, old fears resurfacing. But something had shifted. The group, Alex, the stories of others who'd faced this and survived, they gave him courage. He stepped closer to Ryan, his voice firm. "This is who I am. If you can't accept that, we're done." Ryan's face twisted, but Ethan didn't back down. "Tell them if you want," he said, his heart racing but steady. "I'm not hiding anymore." Ryan left without a word, the door slamming behind him. Ethan stood still, his breath uneven but free. Cutting Ryan off hurt, but it was a release, a shedding of the shame he'd carried too long. For the first time, he felt the ground beneath him, solid and his own. At the next group meeting, Ethan shared his stand against Ryan. The room erupted in quiet cheers, Alex's smile wide. "You're braver than you think," Alex said, his hand lingering on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan didn't pull away. He was done hiding, done letting fear dictate his life. The world outside still loomed, co-workers' questions, his parents' potential rejection. But Ethan felt ready to face it, one step at a time. Ethan stood on a Chicago street, rainbow flags snapping in the summer breeze, as the Pride Parade pulsed around him. 6 months had passed since he'd cut Ryan out, since he'd chosen himself over shame. The support group had become his anchor, their stories fueling his courage to live openly. Now, surrounded by cheers and music, Ethan felt a lightness he'd never known. He was no longer James's secret or Ryan's disappointment. He was free. The months since his stand against Ryan had been a quiet revolution. Ethan started small, telling a coworker he was gay during a coffee break. The words, once impossible, came easier each time. His designs at work grew bolder, reflecting a confidence he hadn't realized he'd buried. He'd even called his parents, bracing for rejection. Their response was hesitant, but not cruel, a promise to try to understand. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. Ethan didn't need their approval anymore. He needed his own. James's life, meanwhile, had unraveled. Ethan heard through mutual contacts that James's fiancée had discovered his lies, not just about Ethan, but about others. She left him, The engagement dissolved in a storm of public whispers. James tried calling Ethan once, his voicemail heavy with regret. "I messed up, Ethan. Can we talk?" Ethan deleted it, his heart steady. James had chosen a facade over truth, and Ethan wouldn't be pulled back into that shadow. The pain of betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined him. At the parade, Ethan wove through the crowd, the energy infectious. He spotted Alex near a float, his laugh carrying over the music. Alex had been a constant since the support group, his steady presence a reminder that Ethan could be loved without conditions. "You made it!" Alex called, pulling Ethan into the crowd. Their hands brushed, and Ethan didn't flinch. For the first time, he didn't scan the crowd for judging eyes. He was here, visible, alive. They danced through the streets, the city alive with color and defiance. Alex's hand found Ethan's, their fingers interlocking as they moved with the crowd. "You look different," Alex said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Happier." Ethan smiled, the truth settling in. "I am." The parade wasn't just a celebration. It was a declaration. Ethan had fought for this moment, through James's betrayal, Ryan's rejection, and his own fear. Each step had carved out a space where he could exist without apology. As the sun dipped low, Ethan and Alex paused by the lake, the crowd's roar fading behind them. "What's next for you?" Alex asked, his gaze steady. Ethan looked out at the water, the city's lights reflecting on its surface. "I don't know," he said, his voice calm, "but I'm not hiding anymore." Alex's smile widened, and he squeezed Ethan's hand. "Good. You don't have to." The moment felt like a beginning, not an end. Ethan didn't know if Alex would be part of his future, but the possibility didn't scare him. He'd faced the worst: betrayal, rejection, the weight of a world that wasn't ready, and come out stronger. The parade's energy lingered in his chest, a promise that he could love, live, and fight for his place. As he walked back into the crowd, Alex at his side, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He was done living in shadows, and the world would have to make room for him. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. More stories are coming that will move you, inspire you, and challenge the way you see your own journey. Every story matters, and each one brings us closer to who we are meant to become.